So from a spectrum perspective, I think 6G may be slightly different to some of the previous Gs. Um, by which I mean that when you think about you know, 3G, 4G, 5G, we tend to associate spectrum being made available, and that's often cleared spectrum being made available specifically for that new G. With 6G, that may not necessarily be the case, and if new spectrum is to be made available, I suspect that will need to be shared. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, firstly, there is no new obvious band that could be easily cleared. All the bands that are being talked about for 6G have got incumbent users in them, and those incumbent users would want to continue to be able to access the spectrum. So that points towards spectrum sharing. I think the other thing is that with the bands being talked about, actually sharing does make a bit more sense. They tend to be higher up the frequency range, and therefore the characteristics of that spectrum might make it much more suitable for sharing. I think the other factor for us in relation to 6G is to think about the use cases. Is there going to be some sort of use case out there that's only going to be available on 6G? Or is 6G going to be a case of just offering better opportunities? And to a certain extent, this would be an extension, I think, of what we saw with 5G. And actually, if anything, consumers are possibly becoming less concerned about whether it's 4G, 5G, or 6G. What they want is better connectivity. They want faster speeds, lower latency, better quality of service. And actually, whatever's going to deliver that is what the consumer wants. So I think from an Ofcom perspective, it's about making spectrum available to meet all the different use cases. So whether that's mobile or Wi-Fi or satellite, but also making the spectrum available in a way that it's going to be used or most useful, whether that's, for example, for indoor or outdoor use cases. And that may vary from geography to geography. So that again points to thinking about how we can make spectrum available in a more flexible way. And as I say, thinking about promoting things like spectrum sharing. Satellite offers some really interesting opportunities. I mean, we're seeing um, lots of innovation in the satellite world, particularly amongst NGSOs, the non-geostationary satellites. From a UK perspective, we're seeing lots of interest in some of those services, particularly in rural areas or areas that may not have such good terrestrial coverage, and consumers starting to take up some of these NGSO services. I think we're seeing, I say, lots of innovation also in things like direct to device is being talked about a lot. There's the 2 gigahertz MSS bands. So lots of interesting opportunities. I think when it comes to spectrum and the policy perspective from the UK, I think it's about making spectrum available and making sure that we can facilitate and enable all these different innovative types of use case. I think the one thing I would say is that, and this is probably stating the obvious, is that the UK is very different geographically to, say, Australia. Obviously, a much smaller geographic area. And I think significantly, across Europe, we have lots of borders. And that does raise some interesting challenges when it comes to satellite issues. So I think, there's lots of opportunities there, but we do need to move forward in quite a coordinated way within Europe to ensure that we can address some of those cross-border issues as well. The report, I mean, in fairness, I'm not sure it actually answers the question in terms of what TV is going to look like in the 2030s. What it does do is it puts forward some options. But I think more importantly than that, in some ways, what it is trying to do is to start the debate now in terms of what the future of TV will look like in the 2030s. And the reason for doing that, and Spectrum's a good example here, is that the lead times tend to be quite long. So if we want to be ready to respond to changing consumer viewing habits in the 2030s, we really need to start thinking about those issues now, to ensure that we're well prepared for what will emerge in the 2030s. And I think from a spectrum perspective as well, that's particularly important. We've just had WRC 23, which had a debate, at least in Region 1, around UHF spectrum. We know that this issue is, well, almost certain, very, very likely to be back on the agenda for WRC 31. And again, that points to starting to think about the issues now, and certainly, in the run up post WRC 27, in order to ensure that we're well prepared for thinking about what the answer should be and getting to the right place at WRC 31.